The day my marriage officially ended, the rain didn't fall. Everyone remembers. Dramatic weather during life-changing moments. Thunder, dark clouds, heavy winds. Mine ended under a cloudless blue sky. Maybe that's why it hurt even more. The world continued as though nothing had happened while 20 years of my life were folded into a brown envelope stamped with the words "Final Decree." My name is Daniel Brooks. For 23 years, I believed loyalty could fix almost anything. Turns out, loyalty can become a language only one person is speaking. 3 months before the divorce, I had noticed something strange. Not because Emily had become cold. She hadn't. She had become careful. There is a difference. Cold people stop pretending. Careful people rehearse every smile. She still kissed me before work. Still asked if I wanted coffee. Still reminded me to take my blood pressure medicine. Everything looked normal. Almost too normal. And that was the first thing that frightened me. People don't suddenly become perfect spouses. They become perfect actors. I ignored it. After all, 23 years together earns someone the benefit of the doubt. Or maybe I was simply afraid of what I might discover. Stories like this never begin with someone shouting. They begin with silence, with routines that become performances, with conversations that somehow stop reaching the heart. If you've ever trusted someone completely, you'll understand what comes next. Because betrayal rarely arrives wearing a mask. It usually wears a familiar face. Emily and I met when we were 24. She was funny in an unexpected way. Not loud, not attention-seeking. She made observations nobody else noticed. On our third date, she told me, "You're the kind of man who apologizes to chairs after bumping into them." I laughed because I'd done exactly that 5 minutes earlier. She noticed people. That was her gift. I fell in love with someone who seemed incapable of cruelty. Maybe she wasn't. Maybe people simply change. Or maybe success changes the people around them faster than failure changes us. Back then, I owned a tiny construction company. 3 employees. 1 truck that stalled every Tuesday. Enough debt to make sleep optional. Emily stood beside me through all of it. She balanced our accounts, brought sandwiches to job sites, celebrated every contract as though we'd won the lottery. Those years were hard, but they were honest. Looking back now, those became the years I would miss the most. By 51, everything had changed. Brooks Development had become one of the city's most respected commercial construction firms. Not the biggest, not the richest, but respected. I built my reputation slowly. No shortcuts, no unpaid workers, no hidden costs. If we promised something, we delivered. It wasn't glamorous, but it allowed me to sleep peacefully. Our daughter, Lily, had graduated college and moved to Seattle. Emily had more free time than she'd ever had. At first, she embraced it. Yoga, painting, volunteer work. Then she started attending business charity events with me. That's where she met Victor Lang. Even saying his name still tastes bitter. Not because I hated him, because I underestimated him. Victor owned Lang Urban Holdings. Flashy, aggressive. Every interview featured another expensive watch, another luxury car, another speech about crushing competitors. He loved cameras more than buildings. We'd competed for projects for nearly 15 years. Professionally, never personally. At least, that's what I believed. The first time Emily mentioned him, she smiled. "Victor is surprisingly charming." I shrugged. "So are snakes." She laughed. "You always judge people too quickly." "No, I judge patterns." She rolled her eyes. It seemed harmless. Just another conversation. Funny how ordinary moments become warning signs after everything falls apart. Over the following months, Victor appeared everywhere. Fundraisers, galas, business lunches. Emily often mentioned how generous he seemed. How confident. How ambitious. Words she'd once used to describe me. Except now, she sounded like she was comparing. I noticed. I simply refused to admit it. Because admitting it would mean accepting something much larger. That the woman who once admired quiet strength had begun craving loud success. I thirst Sanadru. One evening I returned home earlier than expected. Emily sat on the patio, phone in her hand, smiling. Not a polite smile, the kind people wear when someone makes them feel seen. She quickly locked the screen. You startled me. Who was it? Oh, one of the women from the charity board. She answered too quickly. Not enough to prove anything. Just enough to disturb me. Trust doesn't usually shatter in one moment. It develops tiny cracks, each one insignificant, until one day, the entire foundation gives way. Around that same time, Victor began underbidding nearly every project my company pursued, at impossible prices. Anyone in construction knows you can't consistently build quality below cost. Something didn't make sense. Yet somehow, he kept winning. I asked around. Nobody knew how, or nobody wanted to say. Then strange things started happening inside my company. Confidential proposals somehow reached competitors. Clients knew private numbers they shouldn't have known. Someone was leaking information. My management team insisted they were loyal. I believed them. Most had worked beside me for decades. Still, something felt wrong. One Friday night, Emily suggested we attend Victor's annual charity banquet. I already told him we'd come. I frowned. You accepted without asking me? I knew you'd say yes. I might have said no. She looked away. Daniel, not everything has to be a battle. The words lingered long after dinner. Not everything has to be a battle. Strange, because I hadn't started one. Victor's mansion looked less like a home and more like a luxury resort. Imported marble, glass elevators, an indoor waterfall that served absolutely no purpose except impressing strangers. Guests admired everything. I admired the exits. Victor spotted us almost immediately. Daniel! He embraced me like an old friend, too enthusiastically. Then he looked toward Emily. His smile changed. Softer, longer, barely noticeable. Unless you were her husband. I was hoping you'd convince him to come, Victor said. Emily smiled. It wasn't difficult. Something inside me tightened. Nothing inappropriate had happened. Nothing obvious, yet instinct whispered the same warning over and over. Pay attention. During dinner, Victor kept directing conversations toward Emily, asking about her paintings, her volunteer work, her opinions. I became invisible at my own table. People say jealousy makes you imagine things. Sometimes. Other times, it simply forces you to notice what everyone else ignores. On the drive home, I asked carefully, Have you been talking with Victor often? She stared through the windshield. Sometimes. How often is sometimes? You sound ridiculous. I'm asking. Business events. Text messages? Silence. That silence answered more than words ever could. The following week, she left her tablet in the kitchen. A notification appeared. Victor, thank you for tonight. I haven't laughed like that in years. My stomach dropped. I shouldn't have looked. But I did. Hundreds of messages. Not romantic. Not explicitly. Which somehow made them worse. Daily conversations. Private jokes. Personal frustrations. She had been giving another man pieces of herself she no longer shared with me. Emotional affairs don't begin in hotel rooms. They begin when someone else becomes the first person you want to tell about your day. When secrets become conversations. When your spouse becomes an audience instead of a partner. I quietly placed the tablet back exactly where I'd found it. Then I sat in the garage for nearly an hour, unable to start the car, unable to go inside. 'Cause once you know, you can never unknow it. That night I asked her one simple question. Are you happy? She looked surprised. I don't know. Not? Yes. Not? No. I don't know. Sometimes the smallest answers destroy the biggest lives. Marriage counseling lasted exactly 4 sessions. Emily attended physically. Mentally, she'd already moved somewhere else. Every discussion ended the same way. I need space. I need to discover myself. I've spent too much of my life supporting everyone else. I listened. Really listened. Some of her feelings were valid. I'd worked long hours, missed anniversaries, prioritized deadlines. Success always demands payment. Sometimes it collects from people you love. I apologized sincerely, promised changes, asked for another chance. She thanked me, then asked for a divorce anyway. Friends expected me to fight. I didn't. Love cannot be negotiated. If someone wants to leave, holding tighter only guarantees more pain. The divorce remained surprisingly civil. No screaming, no public accusations. Assets divided fairly. She kept the lake house she'd always loved. I kept the company I'd built. When the judge finalized everything, Emily looked relieved. I looked empty. There's a difference. Relief imagines tomorrow. Emptiness forgets tomorrow exists. 6 months later, the invitations arrived. Elegant black envelopes. Emily Brooks. Now Emily Lang. She had married Victor. 6 months. 23 years replaced in 6 months. People whispered. Some defended her. Others condemned her. I ignored everyone. Grief doesn't improve when strangers offer opinions. Business magazines loved the story. The city's new power couple. Victor smiled from every cover. Emily stood beside him, wearing confidence I'd never seen before. One interview caught my attention. The reporter asked Victor about competition. He laughed. In business, second place eventually disappears. I knew he meant me. I simply didn't know how far he was willing to go. Within a year, several of my largest contracts vanished. Clients suddenly canceled. Banks became hesitant. Rumors spread that Brooks Development faced financial trouble. None of it was true, but rumors travel faster than facts. Then my chief financial officer rushed into my office one Monday morning. His face had no color. Daniel, what happened? The city rejected our Riverside proposal. Impossible. They already awarded it. To who? He swallowed. Lang Urban Holdings. Again. Impossible. Our proposal had been stronger, cheaper, safer. Unless someone had seen it first. I hired an independent cybersecurity firm. They discovered something disturbing. Someone had remotely accessed confidential files for nearly 11 months. 11 months. The timing matched almost perfectly with Emily's growing friendship with Victor. Still, there wasn't enough evidence to accuse anyone. Only suspicion. Painfully logical suspicion. I decided not to pursue revenge. Not yet. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. New clients, smaller projects, leaner operations. It humbled me, oddly enough. That humility restored something success had quietly stolen. Perspective. Employees noticed. Morale improved. We fought harder, together, for the first time in years. I remembered why I'd started building in the first place. Not for headlines, for people. Then Lily called. Dad. Her voice sounded hesitant. I need to tell you something. What is it? I had lunch with Mom. I remained silent. She wasn't alone. I already knew. Victor? No. Who? There was another man. The room suddenly felt colder. Are you sure? They looked. She struggled to find the words. Comfortable. Too comfortable. A strange thought entered my mind. What Victor wasn't the destination? What if he had only been a bridge? The idea seemed absurd, yet something refused to leave me alone. Patterns. I trusted patterns. And suddenly, none of the patterns made sense anymore. That evening, after everyone left the office, an anonymous package appeared on my desk. No return address. Inside was a single flash drive, and one handwritten sentence. You lost your wife because you trusted the wrong people. You're about to lose much more. When I plugged the drive into an isolated computer, a folder appeared. Its name froze the blood in my veins. Project Kingmaker. I clicked it, and the first document contained a list of names. Mine. Emily's. Victor's. Several city officials. And someone I never expected to see. The person who had been sitting beside me in board meetings for nearly 19 years. My oldest business partner. The man I would have trusted with my life. At that exact moment, my office lights suddenly went dark. Someone had cut the building's power. Then footsteps echoed slowly down the hallway toward my office door. 1, 2, 3, and finally, a hand reached for the doorknob. The doorknob turned slowly. For a split second, every instinct told me not to move. The office was almost completely dark except for the faint glow of my laptop screen, which still displayed the folder labeled Project Kingmaker. I pulled the flash drive free just as the door opened. Daniel? It was Frank, the building's maintenance supervisor. He held a flashlight in one hand and looked just as confused as I felt. Transformer blew 2 blocks over, he said. Whole street's out. I forced a smile that probably convinced no one. Thanks. He nodded and disappeared. Only after his footsteps faded did I realize my hands were shaking. Not because of the power outage, because I'd been expecting someone else, someone who knew that folder existed. I drove home with the flash drive in my jacket pocket. Instead of sleeping, I sat in my study until sunrise reading every document. Project Kingmaker wasn't just a business strategy, it was a blueprint. Oh! Years-long plan to dominate commercial development across the city by controlling bids, influencing public opinion, manipulating financing, and quietly eliminating competitors. Not through violence, through information. Every weakness, every marriage, every friendship, every financial pressure, everything had been catalogued. Victor didn't simply compete. He studied people until he knew exactly how they would react. Then he nudged them toward decisions they believed were their own. The files contained psychological profiles, business histories, private conflicts, even notes about personality traits. One line beneath my name stopped me cold. Primary vulnerability. Loyalty. Predictable. Refuses unethical retaliation. Can be isolated emotionally. They hadn't underestimated me. They had weaponized my best qualities. Franklin Pierce. Frank. My business partner of 19 years. His name appeared throughout the documents. Meeting schedules. Payment records. Private communications. I wanted to believe there had to be another Frank. There wasn't. I called him before breakfast. Can we meet? Of course. His voice sounded exactly the same. Steady. Comfortable. Like every conversation we'd shared over nearly 2 decades, we met at our favorite diner. The same booth, the same waitress, the same coffee. Only one thing had changed. I knew who he really was. I found something yesterday. He looked up. What kind of something? A flash drive. For the first time in 19 years. Frank hesitated before picking up his coffee. Only for a second. But it was enough. What was on it? You tell me. Silence settled between us. Finally, he sighed. I hoped you'd never see it. Not? I don't know what you're talking about. Not? That's ridiculous. Just, I hoped you'd never see it. My chest tightened. How long? He stared into his untouched coffee. 5 years. 5 years. 19 years of friendship. Destroyed by 2 words. Why? He laughed bitterly. You really don't know, do you? Know what? They came to me after Sarah got sick. His wife. Cancer. I'd attended every surgery, every fundraiser, every hospital visit. The treatments weren't covered, Frank continued. I mortgaged the house. I borrowed from everyone. I even considered bankruptcy. He looked directly at me. You offered to help. I remember. You offered me a loan. I would have given you more. I know. Then why? Because Victor offered certainty. The word hung heavily between us. Certainty. He paid every hospital bill. My anger collided with compassion. You sold us. I sold myself. Frank's voice broke. And after the first payment, there was no way back. He had begun by leaking harmless scheduling information, then proposal drafts, then client strategies. Each compromise made the next one easier. That's how corruption grows, not in giant leaps, in tiny justifications. I hated every minute of it. But you kept going. I convinced myself everyone wins in business. He wiped his eyes. I lied to myself until I believed it. There wasn't a single excuse strong enough to erase betrayal. But understanding why someone falls isn't the same as approving of it. Human beings rarely become villains overnight. Most simply make one desperate decision, then spend years protecting it. Frank handed me a folder. I've been collecting evidence. I looked at him. Why? Because Victor crossed a line. What line? He doesn't lose. I know. No. Frank leaned forward. You don't understand. When someone becomes useless, he destroys them. The folder contained dozens of financial records, secret shell companies, bribery payments, fabricated consulting contracts, everything carefully hidden behind legitimate businesses. There was enough evidence to begin an investigation, but not enough to guarantee convictions. We need more. Frank nodded. You'll get it. How? Someone else wants Victor gone. 3 days later, I learned exactly who that someone was. Emily. She appeared at my office without calling. She looked nothing like the woman from magazine covers. The expensive confidence had disappeared. Dark circles framed exhausted eyes. She stood quietly until I finally spoke. "You look tired." "I am." Neither of us mentioned the divorce. "Not yet." She placed a thick envelope on my desk. "I don't expect forgiveness. I didn't ask for an apology." "I know." Another silence. Different this time. Older. Sadder. Finally she whispered, "I made the biggest mistake of my life." I believed her, not because she regretted leaving me, because regret had completely replaced pride. "I thought Victor loved me." She laughed painfully. "He loved winning." Over the next 2 hours, she told me everything. Victor had pursued her long before our marriage ended. Not because he admired her, because he admired the effect she could have on me. Breaking my family was simply another victory. At first, she believed his attention was genuine. He listened, encouraged her, made her feel exciting again after years of routine. She mistook being desired for being understood. It's a mistake more common than people admit. Excitement often disguises itself as love. Real love usually arrives looking ordinary. Only later do you realize ordinary was priceless. After their wedding, everything changed. Victor became controlling. Every conversation became a negotiation. Every disagreement became a competition. If she questioned him, he punished her with silence. If she succeeded independently, he found ways to diminish it. He needed admiration, not partnership. I kept thinking the man from before the wedding would come back. He never existed. She looked at me with tears she wasn't trying to hide. It was all performance. Exactly as she'd once performed for me. Life has a strange sense of irony. Then came the real reason she had returned. "Victor's company is collapsing." I frowned. "Impossible." So did I. She opened the envelope. Inside were bank statements, emergency loans, international transfers, massive debts. Victor hadn't been building an empire. He'd been balancing one enormous illusion. Every flashy acquisition had been financed with increasingly risky borrowing. Every public success required another hidden loan. He wasn't rich. He was leveraged beyond imagination. One economic downturn, one failed project, one investigation. Everything would collapse. He forged documents, Emily said quietly. He bribed lenders. He moved money through fake companies. He thinks no one can prove it. I slowly looked at Frank's evidence, then at hers, separately. Interesting. Together. Explosive. "Why help me?" Emily answered without hesitation. "Because Lily deserves at least one parent. She can respect." That sentence hurt more than every betrayal combined. Because she was right. The investigation didn't begin with dramatic arrests. It began with accountants, auditors, paper trails, months of quiet work. Victor had always believed power came from controlling people. He underestimated something much harder to manipulate. Records. Numbers don't develop loyalty. They simply exist. Soon investigators uncovered bribery schemes spanning nearly a decade. Several city officials resigned. Financial institutions froze accounts. Investors demanded explanations. The empire cracked faster than anyone imagined. News channels that once celebrated Victor now questioned everything. Headlines changed almost overnight. The man who had spent years controlling. The narrative could no longer control facts. Then came the phone call I never expected. "Daniel." "Victor." His voice sounded older. "Smaller." "I need to see you." "No." "Please." "No." "It's important." It stopped being important years ago. Before hanging up, he said something strange. "I finally understand something." Against my better judgment. Curiosity won. We agreed to meet. Victor no longer resembled the man from magazine covers. No tailored confidence, no expensive smile, just exhaustion. "You look disappointed," I said. "I look honest." He almost smiled. "You won." I shook my head. "No, you lost." He looked away. "I suppose that's true." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he asked the question I'd secretly expected. "Do you know why I targeted you?" I assumed business. He laughed softly. "It started with business." "But you were happy." I stared at him. "You walked into meetings without pretending. You trusted people." You actually enjoyed your employees. I hated that. It sounded absurd until he continued. My father taught me every relationship is leverage. I believed him, so when I saw your life, he swallowed. I convinced myself it couldn't be real. So you tried to destroy it. I tried to prove everyone eventually betrays everyone. The saddest part wasn't that he admitted it. The saddest part was that he genuinely believed it. Some people spend their entire lives proving the world is as broken as they are. I destroyed everything, Victor whispered. My company, my marriage, my friends, my reputation. Then he looked at me. You still have people who care. I thought about Lily, about the employees who stayed, about Frank trying to repair what he'd broken, even about Emily, who had finally stopped lying to herself. We're all responsible for our choices, I said quietly. So are you, he nodded. I know. That was the last time I ever saw him. Months later, he accepted responsibility in court rather than dragging dozens of innocent people. Through years of trials, he received a lengthy prison sentence. Several officials were convicted alongside him. Frank cooperated fully with investigators. He lost his partnership, his career, and much of his savings. But his honesty in the end spared others from repeating his mistakes. He and I never rebuilt our friendship. Some bridges cannot be reconstructed. But I stopped carrying hatred. Hatred keeps broken people living rent-free inside your future. I wanted my future back. Emily never asked me to take her back. I respected that. Trust isn't restored because someone regrets breaking it. It returns only when both people freely choose to build again. Sometimes they don't. And that's okay. We slowly learned how to become respectful parents instead of resentful former spouses. It wasn't easy, but it gave Lily something she'd nearly lost: peace. 2 years later, Brooks' development had quietly become stronger than before. Not because we were the biggest company, because we had become the most trusted. Clients remembered who remained standing after the smoke cleared. Reputation grows slowly, but unlike image, it survives storms. One afternoon, a young entrepreneur asked me for advice. He expected a lesson about contracts or investments. Instead, I told him this: never confuse admiration with character. The loudest person in the room often has the most to hide. And if success ever costs you the people who would have loved you without it, it's already too expensive. He wrote every word down. I hope he understood them before life forced him to. Because I learned mine the hard way. The day my marriage ended, I thought I had lost everything. I was wrong. I had only lost the illusion that love alone can protect a life from bad choices. What remained afterward was something stronger: wisdom, character, the courage to rebuild without becoming bitter. Sometimes divorce isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's the end of the chapter, where you keep trying to save people who have already chosen another path. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't watching your rival lose everything. It's discovering that, while they were busy trying to destroy your life, they never managed to destroy the person you refused to stop being. If this story made you see betrayal, forgiveness, or success from a different perspective, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Sometimes the conversations after a story are just as meaningful as the story itself.